Hi guys, welcome to Sci-Fi Ireland. I'm your host Johnny, and this is our brand new Star Wars show, The Fandalorian. In this episode, we're going to talk about Chapter 9 of The Mandalorian, that is Season 2, Episode 1, called The Marshal. So, warning up front, we're talking about the episode, there will be spoilers ahead. So if you have not watched this episode, pause it, go back and watch The Mandalorian, then come back and get my thoughts on it. So with that out of the way, when we first saw the trailer for this season, some people were saying that they saw Boba Fett's armor on the back of the Mandalorian's speeder bike. This led to discussion as to whether we would see Cobb Vanth or Boba Fett this season. As soon as I saw that this episode was called The Marshal, I knew it was Cobb Vanth, and as far as I know, he's the first character to originate in the books and then go from there to the screen. Usually it happens the other way around. It begins with the voice of the armourer, and she says, "When one chooses to walk the way of the Mandalore, you are both hunter and prey." Then we get a video montage recap of Season 1. Once that concludes, we see the Mandalorian walking through what looks like a pretty run-down town. There's graffiti everywhere. Some of it looks like the helmets of stormtroopers. There's one yellow face that looks like C-3PO, and there are red eyes looking out from the shadows. It's a scene we're familiar with because it was in the trailer, and a lot of people thought that that was the Jawas that were looking out from the shadows. We're going to see later that it was in fact some kind of a hound that we never really get a good look at. Din finds his way to a fight club where there's a Twi'lek bouncer on the door. The Mandalorian tells him he's looking for Gor Koresh, and he's allowed in. Now, Gor is an Abyssin male. We've seen them before in the cantina in Episode 4, and this Abyssin, Gor Koresh, is played by John Leguizamo. You know, the guy that plays the Sloth in the Ice Age series. Yeah, that guy. So his voice is heavily distorted here. Once he goes into the fight club, we see that there are two Gamorreans fighting, and to be quite honest, they look kind of puny. When we think back to the Gamorrean guards that were in Jabba's palace in The Return of the Jedi, these guys were big, they were intimidating, and they were everything that these two fighters just weren't. I mean, there's one scene where you can see the legs of the Gamorreans, and not to brag, but my arms are bigger. Gor wants Mandalorian armor because Beskar is very valuable. He asks if Din is a gambling man. Gor tries to get the Mandalorian to bet on the outcome of the fight. He wants him to bet the armor, but the Mandalorian doesn't fall for it. So Gor brings attention to the fighters in the ring. He says they don't like to bet either, so he shoots the Gamorrean that is winning. At this point, 3 or 4 guys around the Mandalorian stand up and point blasters straight at his head. And Gor threatens either the Mandalorian can give him the armor, or he can peel it off his corpse. That leads again to another scene from the trailer where the Mandalorian activates his whistling birds. Baby Yoda sees the birds being activated and presses the button on the outside of his carrier and has it close over him. Once the whistling birds take out these guys holding the blasters over the Mandalorian, Gor's fighters start to attack him. There are 2 Zabraks in the group. Now, Zabrak is the species that Darth Maul was in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And there's one Zabrak who seems, well, to put it mildly, he seems a bit slow. He punches the Mandalorian in the head while the Mandalorian is wearing a Beskar armor helmet, and he hurts his hand. And then he decides it's a good idea to punch him in the helmet again, repeatedly. This is not the sign of an intelligent person. In fact, the Mandalorian uses it to his advantage, and when he sees the punch coming, he headbutts Zabrak's fist to increase the impact. While all this is going on, Gor heads for the back door, but doesn't get far because just like in the first episode of Season 1, where he's having the fight in the bar, the Quarren tries to run. The Mandalorian uses his grappling line to wrap up his legs and pull him back towards him, and then uses the door of the bar to cut the Quarren in half. This time, he doesn't cut his quarry in half, he ties him up over a streetlight. Now we see a completely different side to this Gor Koresh. He is not as tough as he had first acted. He starts bargaining with the Mandalorian, saying that if the Mandalorian doesn't kill him, he'll tell him where to find another Mandalorian. The Mandalorian agrees, saying that Gor would not die by his hand, and so Gor starts giving him all the information he wants. He tells him there's a Mandalorian on Tatooine, and the Mandalorian replies by saying, I've spent a lot of time in Tatooine, and I've never seen a Mandalorian, but Gor insists there is one in a town called Mos Pelgo. Mando then walks away, turning slightly to shoot out the light above Gor Koresh, leaving him to the hounds. It was very much like in Batman Begins, when Batman and Ra's al Ghul are on the train and it's about to crash, and Batman says, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. Or, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. Well, that's what came to my mind anyway. My question is, if Gor was so interested in finding Beskar, because it's so valuable, that he's willing to risk taking on Din Djarin, and he knows where there's another Mandalorian living, why didn't he send some of his goons to Tatooine to get the armor of the Mandalorian living there? So the Mandalorian heads off to Tatooine and arrives back at the same mechanic called Peli Motto, played by Amy Sedaris, who's still in love with Baby Yoda, by the way, and offers to buy him. The Mandalorian explains to her the quest that he has been given by the armor, and she calls R5 to produce a map of Tatooine so that she can show him where this Mos Pelgo is. This is the same R5 unit that we see in episode 4. We know that because he had a bad motivator which blew in his head. And on this droid you can see the black scoring in the same spot in the head. So we know it's the same droid. So now Din knows where the target is. He borrows a speeder bike and heads off camping overnight with some Tuscans. When he arrives in town, he's driving slowly. It's very much like a spaghetti western where you see the cowboy, maybe Clint Eastwood or someone, coming into town on the horse, very slowly looking around. People are looking at him as he's riding through the town. So he arrives at the saloon and there's a weekway barman. He asks the barman if there's a Mandalorian in the area, and the barman asks, what does he look like? And after pausing, the Mandalorian answers, he looks like me. The barman says, who, the marshal? The Mandalorian replies, your marshal wears Mandalorian armor? At which point the barman gestures with a nod toward the doorway and says, ask him. We turn to see a guy in ill-fitting Mandalorian armor, which you can recognize straight away as that of Boba Fett. The marshal steps in and asks the Mandalorian to join him for a drink. The drink of choice is spotchka, which is apparently made from krill. The Mandalorian watches him as he takes 2 glasses and heads to a table and sits down. As he does so, the Mandalorian turns and takes 2 or 3 steps towards him, at which point the marshal takes off his helmet and puts it on the table. You can see the Mandalorian is stunned as he stops dead in his tracks. He now knows this is no Mandalorian, because for some strange reason in this series it is forbidden for Mandalorians to take their helmet off in public. Even though in both the Clone Wars and Rebels we've seen many Mandalorians take their helmet off, not only in front of other Mandalorians, but in front of non-Mandalorians as well. I have a theory, however. Now, it's not official canon. As I said, it's just a theory. But I've been thinking about this and why this would be happening now. So we know that there was a Mandalorian purge by the Empire. Moff Gideon says so towards the end of the last series. So maybe all the true Mandalorians were wiped out and all that's left is foundlings. Now what's a foundling, you might ask? A foundling is a child from another race that is found and raised as a Mandalorian. All these foundlings would be different races, and so, since there is no more true Mandalorians, these foundlings, who have now grown up and are all different races, are forbidden to remove their helmets, so that the fear of the Mandalorians will continue even though the true Mandalorians are no more. These are all people who have chosen to live as Mandalorians. Also, it unifies these different races under the banner of Mandalore. Like I said, it's not canon, it's just a theory. Anyway, back to the episode. So the Marshal starts to tell the Mandalorian how he got the armor. He said he bought it from Jawas, and our protagonist insists the Marshal removes it. Now here's where I think there's more going on than may be obvious at first glance. He tries to intimidate the Mandalorian. He says, "I'm sure where you come from, you call the shots. But around here, I'm the one who tells folks what to do." So he's kind of trying to put Mando in his place here. First he tried to befriend him, offering him a drink. That didn't work. Now he's trying a different angle. He's trying to be a tough guy, hoping that Mando will back down. But we all know that's just not going to happen. Mando steps forward and says, "Take it off, or I will." So plan B didn't work. Now, he brings up the child. "We're going to do this in front of the kid?" Mando replies. He's seen worse. The Marshal looks around. "Right here, then?" he asks. "Right here," the Mandalorian replies. The Marshal rises from his seat and you see his hand hover over his gun. The camera cuts to his face and you can see in his face he's not really convinced that this is what he should be doing. So my guess, I think he's a bit of a con man. When one line of attack didn't work, he swivels and comes at the situation from another side, always trying to avoid the fact that he knows Mando isn't messing around and he's trying to find a way out of it. And it's not just fear for his life, because he could just hand over the armor and he'd still be alive. He's obviously up to something. Anyway, the standoff is ended when the whole town starts to shake. Both men go to the front door to see this wave travel from the distance and come closer, enter the town and go up Main Street. You know there's something under the sand tunneling along. But it travels up Main Street, and in the distance there is a bantha tied up and he's drinking some water. Next, this massive head comes out of the ground and just swallows up the bantha, goes back into the ground and tunnels on. The Marshal turns to the Mandalorian and says, "I think we can work something out." So he makes a deal that if Mando helps him kill the beast, he'll hand over the armor. He's probably hoping that Din will die in the process, and he won't have to give over the armor. Now the Mandalorian could have just killed him there and then, took the armor, and gone on about his business. But instead he decides to stay and save the village from what is later described as a krayt dragon. Remember in episode 4, C-3PO is wandering through the desert on Tatooine, just having fled the Tantive 4 with R2-D2, and now they've split up and they're going in opposite directions. You see this big skeleton lying on the dune behind C-3PO. That's a krayt dragon skeleton. So they're massive. And when Luke goes out in the speeder to find R2-D2 and he's attacked and Obi-Wan Kenobi comes to save him, Obi-Wan is running with his hood up, covering his face, he's waving his arms and screaming. The noise he's making apparently is an imitation of the cry of a krayt dragon, which scares the Sand People away. And we're going to see in a few minutes just why they're so scared of the sound of this krayt dragon. The two men go back into the saloon, and Baby Yoda is hiding in a pot that looks like a spittoon from an old Western movie. So the Mandalorian's plan is to go back, get his ship, fly over the town, and shoot the krayt dragon. Problem solved. Not so easy, apparently. The Marshal tells him that the krayt dragon will feel the vibrations of the ship and hide in the sand. But don't worry, the Marshal knows where it sleeps. Somehow that's not very comforting. Anyway, the two men ride out, the Mandalorian on his borrowed speeder bike, and Cobb Vanth on what looks like the engine of Anakin's pod racer, which has been modified and turned into a speeder bike. It's nice to see Anakin's pod racer turn up again in canon. So as their trip continues, the Marshal starts to tell his story to the Mandalorian. He said it all started after the second Death Star was blown up. The Empire pulled out of Tatooine and the mining collective took over straight away, and the town became a slave camp. The Marshal was sitting in the bar having a drink, everybody looking at the holonet and reports of the Death Star being blown up, when the mining collective pulls up outside the door agents enter the saloon and start shooting at everyone. The marshal's having a drink, and he hides behind the bar and then runs out the back door with the barman. Hiding again behind the speeder that the mining collective arrived in, he grabs a cantona containing silicax crystals. And off he goes, wandering for days in the desert, with no food, no water, and just as he's almost dead, the Jawas find him. Apparently, the Jawas are very interested in these crystals, and they offer him the best of whatever they have. First, they offered him what looks to me like some kind of blaster. Then he's offered an R2 unit. But the marshal has spotted the Mandalorian armor propped up against the side of Sandcrawler. So he heads back into town, armor on, and kills most of the mining collective agents. The rest jump back in their speeder and drive away. The marshal uses Boba Fett's heads-up system to target the speeder, bends forward and shoots a missile from his backpack, which blows up the speeder car and everyone in it. The town is free and everybody is saved, and now he's a hero. They make him the marshal. But that's not how it happened in the books. In Chuck Wendig's book, Aftermath, there's an interlude on Tatooine just before chapter 32, and it says that there was a guy, Adwin Charu, who was in the Sandcrawler trying to do a deal with the Jawas, and he wanted the armor for himself and refused to give it up. He was trying to get it for his boss. So Vanth shot him in the arm. Adwin dropped the armor, and Vanth picks it up and heads off. He basically stole it. Technically, it's similar. Yeah, he got it from Jawas, but canon is canon. So there's another reason that I think Cobb Vanth is a common artist. So yeah, he did get the armor from the Jawas, but not in the way he told Din Djarin. So I think he's just telling him in a way that will make the Mandalorian connect with him, trying to make him sound better. So they continue their journey until they are confronted in a ravine by a pack of mastiffs. While the marshal is quite obviously very worried, the Mandalorian steps forward and gives a loud call in the Tusken language. He continues to speak in Tusken as he steps forward and crouches down, and the leader of the massive pack approaches Din and he pets the creature. Tusken Raiders step out from hiding and after a short conversation agree that the Krayt Dragon must be killed. They go back to the camp to discuss tactics. Now while they're in the camp, we see a shot of a Tusken Raider using his gaffy stick to clean the teeth of his bantha. So now we know it's a multi-purpose tool, good for more than just bashing Luke Skywalker's head in. Next, they travel to where the Krayt Dragon sleeps, and the Tusken Raider tells them that it lives in an abandoned Sarlacc pit. Cobb Vanth replies, "I've lived on Tatooine my whole life, and there's no such thing as an abandoned Sarlacc pit." To which Din Djarin replies, "There is if you eat the Sarlacc." So the Tusken Raider starts talking again and explains that they've been studying the digestive and eating habits of the Krayt Dragon, and they feed it to make it sleep longer. At this point, we see a Tusken Raider leading a bantha over to the mouth of the cave, where the dragon lives, and tying it up there. He calls into the cave to wake the dragon and starts to run, leaving the bantha behind. But this beast is no fool, and instead of eating the bantha like he's supposed to, he comes out and eats the Tusken Raider. Now, to be fair, I don't really blame the Krayt Dragon for this. I'm not the most pleasant person in the world when I'm woken up from a nap, so I can understand him being a little bit cranky in this situation. It also shows intelligence on the part of the dragon that he eats the Tusken Raider and leaves the tied-up bantha for later. They realise that they cannot do it without the help of the villagers. So now both men must travel back to town to persuade them to help. When they arrive in town, Cobb explains that the Tuskens attacked their town about a year ago and killed half a dozen people, and says that he must have killed twice as many Tuskens. The Mandalorian replies, "The town respects you. My guess is they'll listen to you." Cobb's reply here is very interesting. He says, "I wouldn't be so sure." Now, remember, when the Mandalorian and Cobb Vanth first met, Cobb said, "I'm sure where you come from, you call the shots. But around here, I'm the one tells folks what to do." So why is he now saying that he doubts they will listen to him? This is another reason why I think he's not the man he's pretending to be. So they hold the town meeting, And the marshal says the beast is basically going to eat you, going to eat your herds, going to eat your children. And when people are still not convinced, the Mandalorian says he's surprised the dragon hasn't swallowed the entire town by now. So basically they have no choice but help. So when the Tusken Raiders arrive in town, they did this, as well as when going to check out the dragon's cave. They travel in single file. Obi-Wan mentions this in episode 4. He says they travel in single file to try and hide their numbers. So this is the plan they've come up with. They're going to dig a hole outside the mouth of the cave and bury a load of explosives, so that when the dragon comes out of the cave, all they have to do is detonate the explosives under the dragon's soft belly area, which is its only weak point, and then the dragon is dead. As I've said already though, the dragon does show signs of intelligence, and when they shout into the cave to make him come out, he doesn't come out as far as they need him to come. And when they try to make it angry so that it will charge, thereby coming out far enough to be over the explosives, it instead sprays acid from its mouth on Tusken Raider and villager alike. But as it does so, it does come out far enough that they can detonate the explosives, after which the dragon dives back down into the sand. Neither the Marshal nor the Mandalorian think that it's dead. They're right, of course, because before you know it, it's coming out of the top of the mountain and starts spraying acid again. Igniting their backpacks, they fly up to the beast. We've seen the Mandalorian's rifle disintegrate Jawas and Trandoshans, but it has absolutely no effect at all on the dragon. Neither does Cobb's rifle, so they land again. This is when the Mandalorian has an idea. He tells the Marshal to get the dragon's attention. This he does by firing a rocket from his backpack straight into the face of the dragon. Then replied, "Now what?" Mando says, "Look after the kid," and hits the back of his backpack, setting him flying, just the same way Han did to Boba in Return of the Jedi. The dragon charges, swallowing both Mandalorian and a bantha covered in explosives. The Mandalorian shoots electricity from his rifle into the guts of the beast, and when it opens its mouth to roar, he flies out, hits the detonator, setting off the explosives. And with that, the beast is dead. The Mandalorian gets his armor and a big chunk of dragon meat and heads off, while the Tusken Raiders carve up the carcass, finding a pearl inside it. So what's this pearl? When I was first watching it, I thought maybe it was an eyeball or an egg or something. But no, it's a pearl. So what happens is, as the dragon is snatching his prey, he takes up some sand particles as well. Some of these particles containing kyber, and these kyber particles are then formed into a pearl within the digestive system of the dragon. These pearls can actually be used to power lightsabers. As the Mandalorian is driving away, we see he's being watched by a bald man dressed in robes with a gaffy stick and a rifle on his back. He turns around and we see the scarred face of Boba Fett. So this raises a few questions for me. First of all, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? Did the Krayt dragon eat that particular Sarlacc and then he escaped the dragon? Did he somehow kill the Sarlacc himself and escape? Did the Jawas free him? In the book, there was twisted pieces of metal from Jabba's sail barge in the Sandcrawler as well. So that is a possibility. What has he been doing all this time? Why did he not get his armor back? Is he hiding from somebody? Has he got a new identity? I hope we get answered to these questions in the next few episodes. But that's all we've got for today. To paraphrase The Mandalorian, this is the way to bring back Season 2, a great episode that really whets the appetite for more. And I can't wait to see what's yet to come. So if you're new here, hit the subscribe button so that you will be notified when new videos are posted. Hit the like button because that helps with the algorithm. And let me know down in the comments, what do you think Boba Fett has been up to since episode 6? And what else are we going to see in the second season? But that's all for now. Hope to see you all soon. Bye bye.